Hi, everybody. My name is Lauren, and I am the Omnivorous Bookworm. So today I'm going to be doing my first review of Opium and Absinthe by Lydia Kang. I absolutely love this book. I gave it 5 stars on Goodreads and Storygraph, and my own personal rating system, I gave it 6 stars, which I do if I think it's extra special, and it's probably going to be one of my favorites for the year. I just do that so that it allows me to rate books a little bit, otherwise I would never give anything or hardly give anything 5 stars. So that's why I do that. So this book is not perfect. So I absolutely understand if somebody does have some criticisms, but what it does well, it does so well. So this review is going to be spoiler free, although I will include things that happened at the very beginning of the book. Otherwise, I wouldn't have anything to talk about. So if you consider something that happens in the first 5 to 10% of the book a spoiler, then I guess it has spoilers, but I won't be talking about anything past that. So the book is set in turn of the 20th century New York, and we follow an extremely rich heiress who, at the very beginning of the book, her sister goes missing, and we quickly find out that her sister has been murdered. She's found with 2 bite marks on the side of her neck, like a vampire, and other people start to be found in the same way. So it becomes this mystery as to what is happening. Is it something supernatural? Is it some murderer? Like, what is happening? And at the same time, she is injured. She falls off of her horse, and the doctor, of course, recommends and gives her, I think at the first it would be opium or laudanum, and then later on she uses other things. But so that's at the very, very beginning. And then she also at the beginning meets a young man who sells newspapers, who is I believe he's a Russian immigrant. Yeah, he's a Russian immigrant who's also Jewish, and he lives on the sort of seedier side of town. And so we get to see the different class distinctions and what is happening with the different classes in New York at that time, which is also really fascinating to me. And so that's the story. So that's sort of the setup. It's important to understand that when you have a mystery, that I'm trying to think how to say this, that could be supernatural or could not be supernatural, somebody's going to get disappointed, right? I would recommend if that's something that you like really have strong feelings about one way or the other, just look at what genre the book has been placed in. And I think that would give you a good idea of what's going to happen in the story. That's all I'll say about that. That's something that, like, if it goes one way or the other, and either way you're going to be like, if you have very strong feelings that you want it to be supernatural or you don't want it to be supernatural, I would recommend look at where it's placed in its genre. So first of all, let me just say what this book does really well, and I have never read another book that, for me personally, has explained the situation of addiction as well as this book does, while still having an interesting plot. And that's why I think it's so smart what she did, because we don't just have those rich heiress sitting in her room getting addicted. Like, we actually have a plot that we can follow her, but we still see what's happening internally and also externally to her body. And I think, also when we have historical fiction, this is what I think historical fiction can do really well, that we take a time and a place, well, not a place, but a time that's very different than our own. And we can see these common themes in a way that if it were set in modern day, I don't think it would be as poignant as it is in the book. So she starts off taking the laudanum because the doctor recommended it, right? and she's also grieving. So it makes a lot of sense as to why this is happening, why she's getting more addicted. We can feel her internal dialogue, how she's thinking, how other people are reacting to her, whether they're ignoring it or they're noticing it, and how people feel about it. And of course, at this time, there was so little that was known about addiction. People really didn't understand how it worked. They saw it as like some kind of a moral failing. And so it's quite interesting. It also, the idea that it wasn't illegal. So when she's taking it, it's like, well, I got it from the pharmacy. And at one point, she gets cough drops that are heroin, which is actually true, it's pretty shocking to think that like you could just go to the pharmacy and buy bare cough drops that were just heroin, and that was considered safer. So it gives you a lot of empathy for how this addiction happened, how it's progressing in her, how it's not just an easy, oh, I'm going to stop taking it and, everything will be fine. And so because that has to be a long journey, we have the mystery aspect of the story, which kind of leads us on. We also have the relationship between her and I forget his name. I'm sorry, I'm horrible with names. But the guy who sells in the newspaper. And he, so we have their sort of friendship developing at the same time. And she also has some other friendships that are friendships or relationships that are happening. Some of those relationships are somewhat abusive and somewhat, like the relationship with her grandma gets a little bit physically abusive. So if that's a trigger for you, also, I mean, this is, I think kind of goes without saying, if you have any history of addiction or alcoholism, I wouldn't recommend you read this book, because for me as somebody, I've been fortunate enough to never struggle with, any type of addiction. I don't even like alcohol really. So it was really, I really related to it. And I felt like it was the first time I've always been empathetic to people who struggle with addiction, but I really felt like it just, we have a very clear sense of what's happening. And what I also really enjoy what the author did well, the main character, she's not this, perfect person before her addiction or after addiction, but she also doesn't completely change into this complete monster when she is addicted, which I think is, such a caricature that a lot of writers will do, is this person is addicted, so suddenly, their whole life falls apart and they're a monster. And you do see her life start to fall apart, and you do see her struggle, but it's very slow, it's very gradual, and she's still not an evil person, even if she's lying about, whether she took something or not. She doesn't just suddenly become this, I don't know, maniac or, this awful person. So I really like how the doctor did that, or the writer did that. And the writer is also a doctor, which I think makes a huge difference and why this book stands out so much. And she has also done research before on the history of medicine, which you can really tell when you read this book, because she describes all the physical aspects of what's happening, but she describes it as a person would in their own head, not like clinically as a doctor would. And so I think she does a really great job with that. So some of the parts of this book that I don't think were as successful, again, I really liked it. I think the mystery plot, some people are not going to like how it ends. I feel a little bit torn on it. I can see how some parts are maybe a little bit exaggerated or unnecessary for the mystery, but I was okay with it because I felt like the mystery was such a great tool for pushing the story along that I wasn't as concerned with how it ended up. I mean, I wanted to know how it ended up, but that wasn't going to make or break the book for me, personally. The other thing that I don't think was necessary at all was there's this side plot with Nellie Bly. It's very small. It's like I think that the writer had that in her head because Nellie Bly would have been around this time. She's like a famous journalist. That was her journalist name, that she did a lot of breaking news with going into prisons and calling out a lot of abuses that were happening in society at that time. So I understand why the author wanted to include it. I just don't, the way that it's worked into the story, it's not really part of the story. It's not, I mean, it kind of is tangentially, but it's not really necessary. But it didn't bother me either because, like I said, it's very small, and yeah, I can see why it's not. So other than that, I'm trying to think. I mean, if somebody is very much a stickler, like it's not realistic that, a rich woman would be going around with a poor man at this time. I mean, it's not, but we're also talking about like her sister was killed and it looks like it was a vampire. And I feel like the author gives you reasons, and I feel like her reasons make sense. This is an unusual situation. And I mean, I would rather her be going around New York than just sitting in her room using laudanum. Like, that's not an interesting story. So I'll forgive that. I mean, there's nothing to forgive. I'm just joking. So that's all I can think of as far as why people might not like it as much. There are some content warnings as far as, like I said, the diction. There is attempted SA on the page. It's a very short scene, but it is there. And there is there's some physical abuse that's mentioned off page, and on page, her grandma is somewhat physically abusive as well. So those are any content warnings. If that is something that would bother you, just to give you a heads up. But I definitely want to read more from this author. She has written other books, and I found this book on Kindle Unlimited. It also has the audio with it. The audio wasn't great, I'll be honest, but it was not too bad. And so I listened to it mostly on audio, but I also read it. So if you have Kindle Unlimited, I would definitely check it out, or check out a different book from this author. Her name is Lydia Kang. She's also Asian American. So if you're going to be doing the, what is that called? The Asian Readathon. That's all it's called. I thought it was something more complicated. The Asian Readathon that's in May will be a great author to check out. Like I said, she has many other books as well. This main character is not Asian or Asian American, although they do imply that maybe her father's family had some Chinese background, but she identifies as Caucasian. So the main character is not Asian, but the author is. So it's a great choice if that's something that you're looking for. So again, I really enjoyed this book. I definitely recommend it if it sounds at all interesting to you. And I will see you next time. Bye-bye.